Anthony F. Wainwright was born in 1973 in Mississippi, in a small community where poverty, dysfunction, and instability were often the norm rather than the exception. His early years were shaped by hardship and neglect. He grew up in a broken home where the lines between love, violence, and survival often blurred. His father was frequently absent, and his mother struggled with maintaining the household amid overwhelming personal and financial challenges. For Anthony, childhood was not a place of comfort or growth, but a battlefield for emotional endurance. As he entered adolescence, Wainwright found himself drawn to the streets, not because he was inherently violent, but because the streets offer what his home could not: belonging, structure, and power. Petty crime soon became part of his daily routine. He was arrested multiple times throughout his teenage years for minor offenses, including theft and trespassing. He dropped out of school early and began drifting between towns, falling deeper into substance abuse and crime. By the age of 20, Wainwright was already known to law enforcement in several states. His interactions with the justice system became more frequent, and his behavior grew increasingly unpredictable and dangerous. By the early 1990s, Wainwright had migrated from Mississippi to North Carolina, and then into Florida, where he would eventually commit the crime that placed him on death row. In April 1994, Wainwright, then 21 years old, had already been involved in a series of car thefts and robberies across state lines. During that time, he became increasingly desperate, using drugs to numb himself and hitchhiking his way through the Southeast with stolen credit cards, weapons, and stolen vehicles. On April 27, 1994, in Lake City, Florida, Wainwright encountered 23-year-old Dawn Venezia, a young woman, wife, and mother of two. She was at a grocery store parking lot, likely running errands just like any other day. It was a random meeting, but one that would end in tragedy. Wainwright abducted Venezia at gunpoint and forced her into her car. He then drove her to a wooded area in Baker County, Florida. Over the course of several hours, he sexually assaulted her and ultimately murdered her. Her body was later discovered in the woods, bearing clear signs of the violence she had suffered. Wainwright's crime triggered a multi-state manhunt. Police quickly connected him to the abduction through surveillance footage and eyewitness accounts. He fled Florida and crossed into Mississippi, where he was eventually apprehended in a stolen car, still in possession of weapons and some of the victim's belongings. Upon his arrest, Wainwright initially denied involvement, but later confessed during a taped interview with police, providing details of the crime. He was extradited to Florida, where he was indicted on multiple charges, including first-degree murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, and sexual battery. The prosecution sought the death penalty, citing the brutality of the crime, the premeditated nature of the murder, and the devastating impact on the victim's family. During the trial, Wainwright's defense attorneys attempted to introduce mitigating factors, including his traumatic childhood, history of substance abuse, and emotional instability. Psychological evaluations indicated signs of antisocial personality disorder, but the jury was unmoved. In 1995, after a highly publicized trial, Anthony F., Wainwright was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to death. The jury deliberated for only a short time before recommending the death penalty. The judge upheld the recommendation and formally sentenced Wainwright to die by lethal injection. He was transferred to Florida State Prison, where he would begin a decades-long existence on death row. Since then, Wainwright's life has been one of isolation, routine, and waiting. Confined to a 6-by-9-foot cell for more than 22 hours per day, he has had limited human contact and only occasional access to outdoor recreation or prison library services. He has spent years reading, writing, and appealing his conviction and sentence. Over the years, Wainwright filed several appeals to the Florida and federal court systems, challenging the constitutionality of the sentence, claiming ineffective assistance of counsel, and questioning procedural issues during his trial. However, each appeal was eventually denied, and his execution date was set for June 10, 2025. While incarcerated, Wainwright has reportedly engaged in limited correspondence with family members and prison chaplains. There have been no known public expressions of remorse in interviews, but court documents and reports from spiritual counselors indicate that he has acknowledged his guilt and expressed sorrow for the pain he caused. The family of Dawn Venezia has been vocal in their pursuit of justice, attending court proceedings over the years and issuing public statements reaffirming the trauma that Wainwright's crime inflicted upon their lives. As the execution date approaches, Wainwright's daily life is dictated by the rigid routine of Florida's death row. Breakfast is served early, followed by long hours of silence in solitary confinement. Inmates on death row are allowed limited visitation, and in Wainwright's case, it is not publicly known whether he has received visitors in recent years. In the final weeks leading to June 10th, he will be moved to a special holding area, known as the Death Watch Cell, located adjacent to the execution chamber. From there, he will await the governor's final decision and the last few hours of his life. In Florida, executions are carried out by lethal injection unless the inmate requests electrocution, a rare option in modern executions. For Wainwright, there has been no indication that he has chosen the electric chair. The process typically begins around 6 p.m. local time. If all goes according to the Department of Corrections schedule, Wainwright will be strapped to a gurney in the execution chamber, given the opportunity to speak final words, and then administered a lethal injection composed of sedative, a paralytic agent, and a drug to stop the heart. Executions in Florida are witnessed by a small group, including members of the media, attorneys, prison officials, and in some cases, family members of both the victim and the inmate. It remains unclear whether anyone from Wainwright's family plans to witness the execution. The state has already finalized its preparations, and barring a last-minute stay from the governor or a federal court, the execution will proceed as scheduled. Wainwright's case has become a focal point for both supporters and opponents of the death penalty. Those who support capital punishment point to the sheer brutality of the crime and the overwhelming evidence of guilt. They argue that the death penalty serves justice and brings closure to the victim's family. Opponents, however, argue that Wainwright's troubled upbringing, mental health history, and long incarceration highlight the systemic failures that often surround death penalty cases. They question whether executing a man more than 30 years after his crime truly serves justice or simply perpetuates another act of violence in response to the original one. Wainwright has never been exonerated, and there has been no substantial claim of innocence. His guilt is not in doubt, but as the state prepares to carry out his sentence, public discussion has turned once again to the ethics, effectiveness, and cost of the death penalty in Florida and across the nation. The execution of Anthony F. Wainwright will mark another chapter in the long, controversial history of capital punishment in the United States, a system that continues to provoke debate among legal scholars, religious leaders, and ordinary citizens alike.